and welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Evan Crean. My pronouns are he, him. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living.
My name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I, too, am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
And my name is Dave Riedel. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and movies, writing, blah, blah.
Yes.
You are, sir.
Yeah. Yes, you are, sir, with the tip of the hat. I don't know why I tipped it in my invisible hat, but I'm tipping it.
I like that you're tipping your hat, your invisible hat.
I'm also adjusting my invisible pipe. For some reason, I don't know why I have a pipe too. But
ooh, are you twirling your mustache too? Which is not invisible.
No, that's not invisible mustache, but never usually long enough to really twirl per se. I'm not that kind of villain, unfortunately. Anyway, on the show this week, we've got some movies to talk about. But before we dig into those, we want to say that over on our Patreon this week, our Patreon exclusive audio, we are talking about The Raid, the 2011 action film, aka The Raid Redemption. So we wanted to talk about that because Dave had never seen it before, and it's a lively conversation, I think. So if you're a patron, definitely go check it out. And if you're not a patron, consider joining our Patreon. We have exclusive audio we release every week, including this segment and something like 200 plus bonus episodes that you'll gain access to. So check that out.
And we have merch.
Yep, we do have merch. Actually, I need to get myself some spoiler piece swag. Gotta get some t-shirts and whatnot.
Me too.
Stock up for the
We're slacking.
The spoiler closet, I guess. I don't really know what to call the spoiler piece closet. I'm just going to call it the spoiler closet.
I don't know why that's tickling me as much as it is.
I'm glad it is. So on this week's show, we've got 3 movies we're going to talk about. There is The Tale of King Crab. There is We're All Going to the World's Fair. And the documentary Tony Hawk, Until the Wheels Fall Off. First up, we're going to talk about The Tale of King Crab, which I have seen. It is an Italian film that is directed by Alessio Righi and Matteo Zopis, and it is co-written by them with a story by Tommaso Bertani and Carlo Lavagna. The IMDb summary is more than a sentence. And I'll admit the IMDb summary is probably more interesting than the movie, but I will quickly read it.
Oh!
Italy, today. Some elderly hunters reminisce about the local tale of Luciano. Luciano lives as a wandering drunkard in a remote village of the region called Tusia. Spiteful actions ensue between him and the prince of the region over the rite of passage through an ancient gateway. Fueled by passions and jealousy, these actions result in a horrible misdeed. Now an unfortunate criminal, Luciano is exiled to the distant Tierra del Fuego, where with the help of ruthless gold diggers, he searches for a mythical treasure, paving his way toward redemption. However, in those barren lands, only greed and insanity can prevail. Sounds pretty epic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not quite so epic.
Uh-oh.
So it's a movie that it's firmly divided into 2 parts. And the first part is the story of Luciano. And they have this kind of, wrap around this framing narrative of the old hunters kind of getting together at a bar and singing. There's a lot of singing in this movie. A lot of like kind of Italian folk singing, which is not bad. But they're drinking and they're, reminiscing and they're telling the tale of this guy, Luciano. And there's the first part they call the Saint Mauricio misdeed. And it's all about Luciano. It's the 1800s. He's a kind of aristocrat guy, but he's also a drunkard and he's not highly respected in the village. And he's in love with this woman who's the daughter of this shepherd who works for his father. His father's a doctor. And the prince has this, gate that he has been using for years and years and years to walk his family's sheep, and they graze in this area, and all of a sudden the prince has started locking this gate. And so he gets pissed off. And so he like starts breaking the gate down and, you know, kind of getting in trouble with the prince and the people around him. And he's constantly drunk, and he's getting in fights with the soldiers who are protecting the gate. And so the first part's kind of like this, I'm kind of like lonely, wayward guy. I'm in love with the shepherd's daughter, but she kind of sees me for what I am, which is kind of like a sad sack kind of guy. And then she's more interested in the prince. And what happens is that he gets in a fight with the soldiers. They're like in a bar, and the soldiers who are guarding the gate like smash a bottle on his head. And then he like kind of wanders off, and you know, the woman that he's seeing is hanging out with the prince, and he goes to the prince and he's like, "Hey, you can't lock that gate. I need that." And then kind of wanders off, and the soldiers find him, and the father of the girl find him, and they shoot him and leave him for dead. But of course he doesn't die. So he gets up, kind of dusts himself off, and it's like the saint of feast, I guess, Mauricio. So he goes and gets communion, like you do after you've been shot. And then he goes and he finds the gate, and he firebombs it and sets it on fire, and because he's pissed off the prince and the soldiers. But what he doesn't realize is that the woman he loves is on the other side of that gate, and the soldiers took her in there and like sexually assaulted her, and she's in there, and she like dies of like smoke inhalation. And so he's disgraced, avoids execution, but then goes off on his own. And that's how we get to part 2, which I think is the more interesting part of the movie, where it turns in this kind of like pirate Western. He ends up in Tierra del Fuego, and they're hunting for this treasure on an island that's supposed to be like lost ink and gold, and there's like a shipwreck of like a ship that crashed on the shores. You can even see it there, like still rotting, and it's buried somewhere in the island, and there's all these people who are hunting for it, and he's there, Luciano is there, and this time he's met a priest who is there, who supposedly he knew where the treasure was, and he had this crab that he was keeping in a bucket, and supposedly the crab will help point you to the treasure, because the treasure is buried in some lagoon on the island where those crabs live. So like the idea is you like put the crab down, it'll start walking towards instinctually where it needs to go. And there's a lot of killing between him and these like pirate fellows. Until he eventually finds the treasure at the end. And there's this kind of like it's at that point it's weird because they kind of like forget about the hunters, and it's just like his story. And he's like hallucinating his, you know, lost love who died, and he's found the treasure, but that's kind of like where we leave him, is like he found the lagoon, but the end. So it's kind of slow and kind of long, even though it's an hour and 40 minutes. And I think the second part of the movie is much more interesting when it's this pirate cutthroat kind of story. Because then it kind of just starts to resemble like a classic Western where you're just kind of like wandering around and everyone's like hunting for the gold and shooting at each other. And like there's a part where he gets into it with the ship's crew that he's like agreed with one guy, oh, hey, we're going to split the treasure 50-50. And then the other guys come after them and start shooting, and they shoot the crab and kill the crab before he can figure out where to go. So it's, you know, it's kind of like a brutal, just kind of Western kind of story. I thought the first part was not so interesting, and the second part was a little bit more interesting in the like Western action movie kind of way.
Yeah.
The cinematography is pretty good, I would say. I think probably the most interesting part of the movie is the score. There's a lot of like different types of, well, first of all, the main theme is kind of like this theme that feels very similar to The Godfather in a lot of ways.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like, it has this kind of like old folky kind of style to it, but it sounds like it could be The Godfather. And there are points where you hear it, and then you'll hear the lead character, Luciano, kind of like walking and whistling the theme. Which I like. There's a lot of drums, like heavy drums. And did they just call them like sticks? Like what's the instrument they have where there's like the two wood sticks that they're hitting together?
Claves? Are they short and kind of thick?
I think so. Where you hear, and it sounds like they're literally clinking. You're like clink, clink,
But
clink,
it sounds
clink.
like wood, right?
That kind of a sound. But like, yeah, that's like a good part of the score too. So I feel like the score is probably the most interesting part of the movie. There's like a lot of personality to it. I think the performances are good. The cinematography is good, but ultimately for me, I think it boils down to only being like half of an interesting movie.
Sounds like it. And
That's unfortunate.
as a percussionist, I should know those are definitely claves that you're talking about.
I thought you would know, Dave. I was like, this is percussion thing.
Well,
Dave
when you
should
were
know
like
the
two
answer to
sticks
this.
that you click together, I was like, drumsticks?
No, not that simple. So anyway, I don't need to belabor it, but that's the tale of King Crab. It ultimately makes sense that he is using the crab to find the treasure. So hence the title.
The sequel, The Tale of Lobster Thermidor, coming soon to a legal seafoods near
that
you.
sounds like an interesting movie.
Oh, wow. Did I make you laugh with my attempt at a dad joke? All right.
You did. Yeah.
Oh,
you know
sure.
I love a good dad joke. Well, let's not linger on that. Let's move on to the next movie we're going to talk about, which is the documentary, which is Tony Hawk Until the Wheels Fall Off. It is directed by Sam Jones. It features Tony Hawk, as you would expect. The one sentence IMDb summary follows famous skater Tony Hawk's personal life and career and relationship with skateboarding, including never before seen footage and unprecedented access to Hawk, along with interviews with figures from the skateboarding world. So I've been talking for a while, so I want to hear what you both think about this documentary, which is on HBO Max right now.
Dave, take it away.
Well, I mean, I like skateboarding. So that was cool to see all the skateboarding. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, it's fine. It's strangely, I could just kind of thought for somebody like Tony Hawk, who is sort of a normal person, but is incredibly talented in this one particular thing. I thought it would be a little more outside the box. It's a fairly straightforward narrative. It's like a biopic, except it's a documentary, you know? So, a lot of the camera work is really good, especially like the contemporary skating stuff. But I feel like, didn't Sam Jones direct, which documentary did he direct? I should have known this. This is one of those, I've broken my own rule. Never ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. But I found
Are you talking about the big documentary he did?
Yes.
Waiting for Superman?
But I don't know. I felt like it was just a little too, I was interested in, Tony Hawk's adolescence and just how tall and skinny and gangly he was. And a part of the reason that he came up with the tricks he came up with is because he physically couldn't do them the way they were already supposed to be done. That I found interesting, but it just, after a while, it's just kind of like, well, it's just sort of like, I mean, this could be, a fictionalized account and it would feel the same. I did think that it was interesting, some of the like psychological exploration, self-exploration, but after a while, it's like, all right, would you stop flagellating yourself, please? You were a bad husband and father. We get it, So, anyway. But he seems amiable enough. I mean, I'll take his word for it that he's completely closed off emotionally for the first part, for the first 40 years of his life. Fine. I don't know. I liked hearing from his three older siblings who are significantly older than he is. That part I actually found pretty compelling, just because I was thinking about it. It's like, well, his brother, Tony Hawk's like 53, so that means his brother's 65. His brother's a good-looking 65, by the way. But like, that means like his oldest sibling is like 70. Doesn't she say she was like a junior in college when he was born? I mean, wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although I have a friend like that. She's got three older siblings she's like 45 now, and her next oldest sibling is 65. So all the same. Yeah,
Wow.
all the same parents.
That is
You
a
know, it's
gap.
not like second marriage is like the oops. Anyway, yeah.
The oops.
So
I like the oops.
So yeah, I mean, it's a pleasant diversion. I learned some things about him I didn't know, and I got to see some cool skateboard stuff. The thing that maybe is the most interesting about it is I was of that age, like in the mid 80s, when skateboarding was really taking off and Thrasher magazine was a big deal on that shit. So to kind of be reminded of that was cool. And to see all of those skate fashions from like the late 80s, I was like, boy, I remember that shit. Like everybody wore that
Oh,
shit,
yeah.
whether you skated or not.
Yep.
So that was kind of cool.
Mhm. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, it is kind of amazing how
Yeah.
that kind of permeated fashion and pop culture at
Oh, yeah.
large. Yeah.
I know so many kids who never had been on a skateboard in their lives, but they still had like the super long bangs on one side and the really
Yes.
short on the other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Oh, by the way,
Oh,
he did not do
okay.
Waiting for Superman. I have to correct myself.
Okay.
The editor did Waiting for Superman or somebody
I see.
on it. Yeah. So I scratch that. I totally fucked that up.
Wilco. He did the
worries.
Wilco
Dave, I am
documentary.
so glad.
That's it.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yes, their album. Yes. I'm so glad you said all of that. I had you start because I was like, oh, I don't want to come out of the
hot.
gate negative, but I know, coming in hot. I did not like this
Ooh.
documentary at all. I was bored to tears. I thought this was so routine of a documentary. Tony Hawk himself is a really interesting person. And to me, the biggest mistake a documentary can make is resting their laurels on their subject matter. Like, oh, this is an interesting subject, so we don't have to do a lot. We don't have to zhuzh it up.
Zhuzh.
And to me,
Yeah.
I love a zhuzh. And to me, that made this documentary so boring because I don't care about skating. Like, yes, I think those are cool tricks. Those are interesting to watch. For me, all of like 3 minutes and then I'm done. And so it's very repetitive, very rote, very formulaic. I was so bored. I couldn't take it. I was like, and why is it
A little
over
long.
2 hours long? The editor should be ashamed of themselves. It is way too long. No, it's just no. I will say Tony Hawk was really interesting to listen to. I think Stacey Peralta
Yeah.
was also really fascinating to listen to.
Yeah.
And the guy, I can't remember his name, but the guy who was super zen.
that
guy's
who was a
amazing.
skateboarder.
Yeah.
Yes, he was great. I could
Stoner
have listened to a whole
philosopher.
documentary. I could have listened to a whole documentary of just him talking about what skating means. Now you have to skate with your heart. And he was just riveting. So I like the three of them. And yeah, and his siblings were fine too, like especially the brother who he had such a great relationship with. To me, I really liked the stuff
Oh.
that you didn't like, Dave. The stuff that came kind of at the end where you find out he's so fucked up in his relationships and he's
Yes.
like really shitty.
I dug it
and
too.
hasn't been there for his kids and all of that. And how fame got to him. And he was talking about how fame is such, it's such a dangerous drug. And I was like, wait, why are we getting into this an hour and 30 minutes
Yeah.
into this documentary? Like, why didn't we see that or hear that earlier? And that's the part that I found really fascinating. And I also found the part at the very end really fascinating when he's like 56 and he's still doing all of these skateboarding tricks and they're worried about him getting
53, I think.
concussions. And what?
53, I think. But yeah, it's crazy
Okay,
to me
50
that he's
sure,
still
53.
doing it. Yeah.
But right. And that's what I mean. Like the fact that he's still doing it and the fact that he's, hitting his head and he's broken his body and they're all talking about that. But that's not, that is interesting in and of itself. But what's really interesting to me, which I wish they had delved into more, and I think it's a really missed opportunity for this film, is that kind of obsessive nature with it. Because all I could think about while watching it, especially that facet of the film, was about Free Solo, which is one of my favorite documentaries, which is all about, free climbing and about the obsessive nature of climbers and how they could die at any moment and they do it anyway and they don't care. Not that they don't care, but they kind of do it anyway, even no matter how dangerous something is. And I was like, that's what I want to hear about. Let's dig into this. So finally, when the documentary is getting interesting to me, it's like, oh, and now we're done. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The thing about his psychological profile, it's like, I don't know why I knew this, but I knew that he'd been married 4 times And so by the time they get to that, it's like, well, yeah, guy's been married 4 times. You think he'd like staying home at night? I mean, Jesus, so things are weird in the Hawk household. So,
Yeah.
Which I didn't know, because I didn't really know anything about him other than he was an amazing skater and he had video games that were wildly successful. Like, that's all I knew. And Dave, you brought up this great point too about how it was cool about how he modified his tricks because like he couldn't lift the board, and so he did it in the air and everything. That's really cool too. I don't want to make it sound like it's not. I don't know. So I feel like that part's cool in the beginning, and then the end part, like the middle, I was like, I just didn't care, unfortunately.
How about you, Evan?
Fair enough.
But Evan.
Yeah, I was going to say, I like this a lot more than both of you. I've always been interested in Tony Hawk's story. I've thought he was kind of like a fun, fascinating guy in terms of both his being kind of this dominant presence in a sport for, 30 years.
Yeah.
30 plus years. I think they probably got to some of the like more fucked up aspects of his life, because I feel like he probably achieved the level of fame that would get him to the like fame is a drug and I'm off the rails in like the 90s, when he started getting really famous because of the X Games and the Tony Hawk video games. So I could see why they kind of saved that for later, but I was really interested in the earlier parts of his childhood, which I knew very little about. It was interesting to me that his father was so supportive of him and was so involved, even though that was kind of a double-edged sword in that other people were kind of, rooting against him or feeling like he had some kind of unfair edge due to nepotism. I liked hearing about how he adapted skate tricks to fit his own kind of skills and strengths, especially when he was kind of a scrawny young kid when he was first starting out. I love the punk rock and like surf rock soundtrack, particularly heavy in the middle part of the movie. And I didn't realize the degree to which a lot of his skills came from just sheer brute force determination. And so just hearing about his early life, hearing how determined he was to just nail these tricks and at whatever cost was really interesting, especially seeing the opening part where he's, his current age and he's trying to do the same tricks he's been doing, for years and years and years. And he's failing and, just taking such bad falls, and he's swearing and he's getting so angry, and just seeing that through line for him over the years of, I'm so determined, I'm going to figure this out, and I'm just going to keep doing it. So by the point where we get to later in the film, where you both were talking about, I thought was utterly fascinating when we get to, Tony Hawk's in his 50s and he's still pushing his body like he's, in his 20s. And I think there is a really fascinating idea. It really made me think of the movie Days of Thunder when there's that scene after Michael Rooker gets injured in a car crash and Tom Cruise gets injured in a car crash, and they're racing their wheelchairs down the hallway because they just don't know any other way than to just live on the edge. And so I think there is a really fascinating idea of examining people whose work is their life, especially when their work is, putting their bodies on the line constantly and living on the edge and being extreme. And that part of the movie, like really, when they got serious, that really got to me. Like, especially the fact that Rodney Mullen is the one that says, I'll keep skating till the wheels fall off. And seeing Tony Hawk, fall and hit his head horribly multiple times, but especially now when they're, we're going to do this reunion thing. We're going to relive this thing we did. And we see him take this horrible fall. It knocks his helmet off. Everyone's standing over him. They're not even sure if he's going to be able to get up. And so that to me really stuck with me on an emotional level. What do you do when you're that kind of person? And they're talking about this idea of like, yeah, I know it's wrong. We shouldn't still be pushing ourselves this hard. But it's kind of like they passed the point of no return. Like years ago, at least a good 10 years ago, maybe more, of they're already in pain. Their bodies are already breaking down. They've broken so many bones, their bodies are falling apart. And so it's either hang it up or just keep going where they're going. So at least they get some amount of happiness in small bursts.
I just wanted to
So
I wanted
found
to
it very
break in real
compelling.
quick. The day before the day that this documentary premiered, I don't remember which, Tony Hawk broke his femur doing a trick. So
Yep.
it's like,
He did.
I mean, the wheels might be falling off, you know? I mean, a femur break for a 53-year-old, that's rough, you know?
Yep. It's a big deal. And I remember reading his post about that on social media, which is, before I was able to see the doc and thinking, wow, that's intense. That's a lot to deal with. And I remember seeing him, he walked on stage in the Oscars. I'm like, how did he even get on the stage with the broken femur? But he figured it out. And I don't think that's a good thing necessarily. I'm just saying I was shocked to see him upright and being on stage at the Oscars after that. But I don't know. I found this very compelling, both from I've always thought he was interesting. I've always enjoyed his mistaken identity stories, which is a whole thing unto itself. I don't know if either of you are familiar with those.
I feel like I've heard one where somebody was like, hey, you look just like Tony Hawk. And he's like, oh, no kidding.
Yeah. He has many, many stories like that where he goes places and people say things like, you look like Tony Hawk, or they make comments like that. And he's like, I am Tony Hawk. And so I was kind of sad there wasn't one of those in the documentary, but he just tells them online enough. But it is interesting for someone to be so famous and so revered in sport, but also like on a day-to-day level, have that kind of, I could mistake you for someone else quality.
Yeah. I wish I should look up some more of those stories, because that kind of stuff just makes me laugh. Well, Evan, I'm glad that you enjoyed it more than Megan and I did.
I mean, I think I was ultimately the most interested to see it, so I'm glad that I'm glad that it wasn't disappointing to me.
Yeah, I think that it needs to be re-edited. I think if you took all that material and you re-edited it, it could be a really fascinating documentary for me.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it was still fascinating to you.
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah, it just kept reminding, like I said, it just kept reminding me of better documentaries elsewhere that focus on obsession and pushing your bodies and past the breaking point. So, yeah,
that's fair. I did find the scene extremely compelling when he was trying to nail the 900 and seeing all those attempts where he had a stadium full of people watching him try and nail the 900 and then finally nailing it after like who knows how many tries.
Yeah, something really interesting about that somebody brings up after that. I think it's Stacey Peralta, about how you'd never get that opportunity in any other sport. Like the clock would run out. So you wouldn't get it in the Olympics. You wouldn't get it like if you were playing football or whatever. Like the clock's going to run out. That's it. You're done. But here in skateboarding, you are allowed to do that. And so that is kind of amazing that you're given so many opportunities to do this. So yeah, that was really cool. So it was cool that he finally nailed it, of course.
Yes. But for his physical safety, I'm glad that he has retired the 900.
For now.
For now.
For now, right.
I know. I'm like, oh, Jesus. I'm like, he's never stopping. Never. Yeah. I mean, his whole life is skating, like everything. Right. Like that's what his wife said. Like everything is embedded in skating. Like, yeah. I'm sure it's hard to separate.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I guess unfortunate that I don't have that type of life, that my well-being is so inexorably linked to something that's so dangerous.
Did you say that's too bad? I think that's a good thing.
No, I meant to say that's a good thing. I think I'm fortunate that I don't have that situation, that I'm not so horribly addicted to something that's so horribly dangerous for my body.
And that's the really fascinating part, is it is an addiction. It's an addiction. It's an obsession. And that is so fascinating to me. Yeah. But anyway, I want a documentary on that.
I think it's a worthy subject. And I like that they dig into that. But I understand that the criticism that they get to it kind of like too late in the documentary.
But at least but to your point, at least they do touch on it, because they very easily could have not and just been like, oh, yep, this is what he's doing now. La la, bye bye.
Yeah, I respect they went there, and I also respect they didn't gloss over him being an asshole and a shitty dad and husband.
Right, right.
Which so many documentaries are like, here's all the great things about this person and none of their flaws.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also not that person sitting there saying, yeah, I fucked up. I was a shit person. how often do you see that? Even if
very
the
true.
doc talks about it, they're like, okay, that person was a jerk, and then you never hear from them being, yeah, I'm sorry, I was an asshole and a bad father and bad husband and et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, do we have any parting thoughts on Tony Hawk Until the Wheels Fall Off?
Not me.
Not
Okay.
me.
All right, so then let's dig into We're All Going to the World's Fair, which is written and directed by Jane Schoenbrunn. And we'll give you the one sentence IMDb. Alone in her attic bedroom, teenager Casey becomes immersed in an online role-playing horror game wherein she begins to document the changes that may or may not be happening to her. Well, I suspect you might be able to guess that game is called We're All Going to the World's Fair, based on the title of the movie. But yeah, so Casey decides to take the We're All Going to the World's Fair challenge, or the World's Fair challenge, I think it's called in the movie. And you have to prick your finger and put blood on your computer screen and say, we're all going to the World's Fair multiple times. It's kind of like Bloody Mary meets Candyman meets The Ring meets Unfriended. It's kind of like
all of
an
that,
amalgam of all those kind of like horror movies. So yeah, this movie I think originally premiered at Sundance in 2021.
Yep.
And then now it's kind of getting a wide release. This is my first time watching it. Had both of you seen this before? Was it your first time?
I'd seen it. Time. Yeah, I saw it at Sundance last year.
So what did you both think?
Megan, I know that you already talked about this, but why don't you go ahead?
I did talk about this off mic. So I love this movie. I think this is a brilliant, weird, beautiful, strange film. And I was riveted by it when I saw it at Sundance. There were certain images in the film that were just burned on my brain, that stuck with me over a year later. And watching it again, I still love it. I think it is so well done. I think it very easily could have been, and your mileage may vary, but for me, I think it could have very easily been boring because so much of it takes place on computer screens. And sometimes that feels very gimmicky. Sometimes it can work, though. There are certain films where it does. And I think it really works really well here, that we see Casey on a computer screen constantly, but we also see her walking around her town, but she's always alone. She doesn't interact with anyone. We see the guy, JLB, I think his name is, who contacts her because he's really concerned about her because he has so many things to tell her and she's in danger and he's got to talk to her about this. Yeah, and I think this is just really, really fascinating. And I think another layer, there's so many layers in this, but I think what's really fascinating is that Jane Schoenbrunn is a non-binary filmmaker. They're a trans non-binary filmmaker. And I read an interview that she did with Autostraddle that was really fantastic, talking about transness and body horror and art and this film. And there are so many trans moments in there, like talking about how one of the videos after someone has done the World's Fair challenge, their body is turning into plastic and things like that. And it's fascinating to think about how these trans themes play out. And they talked about in the interview about how body horror so often has a trans theme to it or trans connotation. Yeah, and I think that there's just something really interesting. And they had talked about how from their childhood, they were really drawn to like online chat rooms and fantasy because they couldn't be themselves in their life. And they didn't know that they were, and something else interesting too, they didn't know that they were trans or non-binary until they started working on this film and started writing it over the course of like 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So I think that's really, really fascinating too, that we're getting, this is their process of transition. Like we're seeing the process through this film in many ways. And I just think that's incredibly fascinating and incredibly powerful. And yeah, what Casey goes through, and again, it's very, intentionally ambiguous. And our friend of the show, Deirdre Crimmins, wrote a great review in Rue Morgue about how what this film does so well is it revels in the ambiguity and you don't get any clear-cut answers. It's asking a lot of questions, but not giving a lot of answers. And it's showing the discomfort in that ambiguity. But I think it's really interesting that we don't really know if what Casey is experiencing is real or if it's imagined or what's happening. But the bodily changes potentially happening are really fascinating because you can think about that with puberty. You can think about that with transness, with queerness. It's just, it's so fascinating. I have more to say, but I'm dominating. The last thing I will say, before possibly saying more later, is that I think Anna Cobb gives an absolutely fantastic performance. This is her first film, and she has such an incredibly expressive face. And I just think that that's wonderful. And I have more to say, but I want to hear what you guys have to say.
Dave, how about you? Sorry, friends.
Psych.
You got to go next. No, I'm just kidding. I'll agree with Megan quickly that the lead performance is really good. And she does have a very expressive face.
Yes, that's true. I tweeted about this as I was watching it. I don't know if either of you saw that because
I did not.
I did not.
How much you pay attention to it? Well, I'll pull it up because I can't remember exactly what I wrote, but something to the effect of, I'm watching We're All Going to the World's Fair, and I just paused it and turned on every light in the house.
Right? It's so freaky.
Yeah, it is
so
creepy.
Freaky.
A lot of it takes place at night. She's recording these videos in her room in the middle of the night, or wandering around their property and, wandering into the shed in the middle of the night.
And watching ASMR. Thank you for making ASMR videos creepy. Ugh, We're All Going to the World's Fair.
I thought of you, Dave, because I know you love ASMR.
Love ASMR.
Least favorite part of the movie.
And I know that
right?
ASMR,
I'm with you, Evan.
I know that ASMR artist, not personally, I've just seen the work before. So, what did you say, Evan? You don't like ASMR?
It was my least favorite part of the movie.
Yeah.
Oh.
It just went on so long. That one scene.
Well, it's also not a particularly good video. And you can tell that it's somebody who either concentrates on lo-fi or doesn't have a lot of experience doing videos. That's another story for another time. I just found the ambiguity of this movie like really unsettling. And I mean, I couldn't even figure out, like, the guy who starts pulling the tickets out of his arm.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that started out being really gross, and then I was kind of like, this is actually kind of funny because it's so weird.
Right? It's gross. It's funny. It's weird. I love it.
Like, I was just kind of like, I can't tell whether these people have like lost their minds, or they're looking for attention, or they're making it up, or whether it's actually happening. Like the guy jogging on his treadmill, slapping himself in the face because he can't feel anything. Mm-hmm. It's just like, this is fascinating. And I think that some of the point is just like, these are just things that happen, or experiences that we have, based on what we're going through. And I'm just thinking to myself, so is Casey like suicidal, or is she just bored, or is she unhappy? There's like you said, Megan, there are so many questions and next to no answers. Like when she tears up her childhood stuffed animal doll.
Oh,
yeah.
It's so sad.
And then she leaves her room, and then she's let's put possessed in air quotes, and she does that. She leaves the room, she comes back, and she finds that she's destroyed Poe, and she's just like out of her mind with, regret, saddened. I guess not regret, because she didn't know she did it, supposedly. I just was, ambiguity in movies doesn't usually bother me, and I wouldn't say it bothered me in this, but the whole second storyline with JLB or JBL, JLB, right?
I think.
I was just like, what is this guy's deal? Is he a pedo like she accuses him of? Or is he some guy who did play the game and sort of lost his mind? And then his whole thing at the end when he talks about them getting together in New York because she's a college student now, I'm like, did that even happen? I mean,
unclear.
Intentionally
so.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the whole movie is from her perspective, almost the movie's 85 minutes long, and 79 minutes are from her perspective, right?
Right.
Yep.
And like, why is he a grown man with like a 13-year-old kid's room? Like, is it his son's room? Like, did his son die from playing this game? Is that why he's so concerned? There's just so many unanswered questions here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And at one point, there's somebody in his house. He's sitting on the sofa with a glass of warm milk. And then you see somebody
milk.
like leaving.
Microwaved milk, because we see him microwaving it.
Yep.
And then you just see somebody like, back in a different part of the house, just like going about house stuff and then just leaving. And it's like, wait a minute. So is this what? I think I enjoyed is not the right word. I thought it was fascinating, and I think it's really well done. I'm not sure I understand it. I don't know that it's meant to be understood. I think this might, sort of be one of those movies where, filmmaker makes it and now it's a blank canvas for, the audience to put on whatever is going on with them, I mean, because you could interpret these things in so many ways. I mean, like that video that Casey posts where, she's asleep and JLB is like, all right, and then this happens as close as I can tell.
That face.
So
it's
freaky.
like 4:45 a.m.
Maniacal grin and like weird scraping motion on the sheets with her arm.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Yeah. And it's like, did that actually happen, or did Casey manipulate that and post it? I mean, like, what did he manipulate it? Like, what? And that's really like the only quote supernatural unquote thing I think that happens. All the other stuff is sort of, I mean, the thing that really freaked me out is I kind of zoned out when Casey was having like the solo dance party in her room.
I love
and then
that.
Then she just unleashes like those 4 or 5 blood curdling screams and then just goes back to dancing like nothing's happened.
So startling.
I love it. I love it so much.
And I should have known better. I should have known it's like we're spending a lot of time watching her dance for no apparent reason. But I was just
coming.
like,
It's coming.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I don't. I mean, I'll just kind of keep rambling about, things that we all know that happened on screen. But, I don't know.
Yeah. The other thing I want to say, and then Evan, I definitely want to hear everything you have to say. The other thing is that I don't know if you guys read the director's statement in the press notes that came with the screener, but that was absolutely fascinating because Jane Schoenbrunn talks about, again, more about trans themes in the film and horror. And they talk about how they were grappling with their feelings of gender dysphoria. And that's a lot of that in this film, and how so often they had never seen gender dysphoria explored in films the way that trans people often experience it. Like there's Dallas Buyers Club and there's Boys Don't Cry. And there's other films, but they're looking at it from a cis filmmaker's perspective. Mm-hmm. And this is looking at it from a trans non-binary filmmaker's perspective, which is fascinating. And they reference the trans film critic Willow McKay, and she talks about in an article about transness in films, about so often cis filmmakers think that trans bodies, it's from the external and that impacts the internal, but that's not true. It's the internal that happens first, and then that is what impacts the external. And I just thinking about that and reading that made me reframe the film in a different way, and just like thinking about how Casey is like tearing her stuffed animal Poe apart. To me, it felt like she's not comfortable where she is. Her father is clearly angry, toxic, abusive, something, because we never see him on screen. We just hear his voice yelling at her from downstairs. And she, as soon as he comes home, she takes her dinner plate and like runs upstairs. So clearly she's not happy in some capacity, that possibly other things. And she's ripping apart her childhood beloved, stuffed animal. And it feels like she's trying to rip the tethering of her childhood, like trying to forge a new identity. And I found that just absolutely mind-blowing and just great, and is so fascinating. And I think you're absolutely right, Dave. There's so many ways, just because, we're told like, oh, this is about gender dysphoria and this is about transness, which I think it absolutely is, of course. it is definitely open to interpretation for other audiences too. And I think that that's so fascinating about this film. Like there's just so many ways to unpack it and to look at it. But Evan, what did you think of the film?
You're probably going to be disappointed that I wasn't as big a fan of this movie. I think I was definitely, what was keeping my attention and kept my attention through the whole thing was that ambiguity that you're both talking about, because that really, it kept me hooked. Like, what is this? What's going on? Is this real? What's real? What's not real? And that part of the movie just kept me guessing in a way that I wanted to see it all kind of resolved. That said, I think this movie, you could probably predict, was not my kind of movie, in that it gets just too weird in places. Like, we finished the movie and I was like, well, that's a movie we watched. That's a movie we consumed with our eyeballs. I think I generally, in the way that you both don't watch trailers, I try to steer clear of press notes and things, not because I'm not interested in what the director has to say, but I try to, when I'm at least watching it through, try to just kind of interpret on a very gut level. And it's really interesting hearing you describe all of the like intentions or the idea of the director exploring the trans themes, because I didn't pick up on that. And it's interesting hearing you talk about it, even though it wasn't something that I was processing at the time. But I think for me, there are points where I felt like, especially in the ASMR section, I almost felt like I was being trolled as a member of the audience. Like, the director, you know, like we're doing things that are like intentionally weird and making you feel uncomfortable, especially the ASMR segment. Like, this is going on way too long. It's making you feel really uncomfortable. And so I don't know if that was intention or not, but that's how I felt. And so while the ambiguity pulled me in and it kept my attention throughout the whole thing, ultimately I've kind of like walked away from it going, well, that was ambiguous, and I'm not sure I feel like I have the answers to make me feel satisfied by it, but it was definitely interesting watching it. if that's a reasonable interpretation of the movie.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And I think you raise a really great point about production notes and press, like director statements. I never read them in advance. I only read them after I've seen a film, because I'm very similar to you, Evan. I like to go in, I don't like to know anything about a film. I like to go in and kind of just let it wash over me. And then, for me, I definitely got queer vibes immediately, and I got trans vibes immediately, because so often with body horror, I get trans vibes, probably because I read trans film critics who talk about body horror. So it's kind of like on my radar. So yeah, just because I'm not trans, I'm cis. But yeah, so it's kind of in my head. So I was like, oh, there's definitely queer vibes going on here. There's definitely some trans themes. But then when I read that interview, which the interview just came out like a day or two ago, that I was referencing, and then the press notes I read today before we recorded, oh yeah, now it's like even more clear. Like like the things I was kind of like vibing with are kind of like, oh, I wonder, or, oh, that kind of seems like that. Yeah. So, yes, and also the other thing I want to say too is you shouldn't have to read an interview or a director's statement or press notes or anything else, you know, to interpret a film. It's just, I think it just enhances.
Yeah, it definitely can. And I enjoyed hearing it. You know what I mean? Like,
cool,
I was just saying, I was enjoying hearing that perspective, because, you know, as I'm like looking back in the movie, I do see what you mean. And I do see places and more, I think probably on a subconscious level is more picking up on the queer vibes of the film, like this person who's feeling very outsidery, feeling very alone, not knowing where they kind of like plug in with the world. That part to me was very stark for her character. And like Dave was saying earlier, it was difficult to pinpoint, is it she's lonely? Is it she's bored? Is it that she's becoming mentally unglued? And the movie does a good job of really planting the seed of doubt, where you just don't know throughout. It's so difficult to tell, you know, is JLB unhinged? Is he in touch with reality? Who fucking knows? And so I think that's definitely his strength, is that this movie, it just keeps you guessing. Whether you're satisfied at the end is a different story, but it definitely keeps you on your toes.
I completely agree. I completely agree with everything both of you have said, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that I would say I was confused, but I would say that, like, I just don't know, you know? So,
And that's unsettling.
Yeah, that's true. But a couple of really strong performances though from Anna
Right?
Cobb and then JLB. Yeah. I remember, like, right before the ASMR scene. First of all, by the way, that is not a great representation
We got
of ASMR.
ASMR expert here, folks.
And also, the other thing that I, of course, will fully acknowledge, ASMR is not for everyone. You know?
Yes, you always say that. Always.
Yeah, you either experience it or you don't. And even if you do experience it, maybe you don't like the video, like who knows. But what I found so unsettling is, first of all, she goes and she finds that rifle. I'm like, what the fuck is she doing getting this rifle?
Oh my God.
Yep.
And then
Creepy.
she puts it away. And then she goes to the other part of the barn or the garage or whatever the hell it is, the outbuilding. And she lies down on, I think those are like car seats that are, right? It's not like a sofa, is it?
I think it's a sofa.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
And so that video is going on forever. And then every time I saw those arrows like moving in a circular direction, I just, every hair on my body stood straight up.
I'm glad you brought those up because they're an ever present part in the movie is those kind of, they're listeners, they're arrows that are kind of like rotating in a clockwise motion, kind of like you would when you're like buffering a video online or you're waiting for the next video to load. And every time they come up on screen, they just evoke this sense of dread. Like what creepy fucking video is going to come next in this fucking autoplay roulette of doom?
Yeah. And then JLB's
Evan, that's
avatar.
The best. You win the night.
Yeah. Then JLB's avatar. It's like this of all the things you're trying to reach out to her and tell her you're helping her, and this is your avatar.
That avatar's terrifying.
Yeah, it's the Joker. If the Joker's eyes were extremely small and like surrounded by these like massive dark circles.
Yeah.
So creepy. It's the avatar of nightmares.
Yes.
Well, and the thing that's really interesting about that avatar is that when it cuts to JLB in his room, he's got lots of drawings of that same character like around his computer, but then the rest of his room is like normal 13-year-old bedroom. Like no weirdness,
trophies, shelves, like a wood desk, a very like wood panel-y kind of setup there.
Yeah, really bizarre. And then just the whole thing when they have their argument and she signs off from their Skype. By the way, I'm now terrified of hearing the fucking Skype ringtone.
I know, right?
Yeah, exactly. So she signs off from their Skype call and then she writes, "I don't ever want to talk to you again." And then big pause, pedophile. And it's like, well, maybe. I mean, who knows? But then he walks from one end of his house to the other. He walks downstairs, walks to the other end of the house, and he's just like looking at the mantle or something, or like I think there's a TV, a TV, blank TV screen that's turned off above the mantle, and then he just says no, and then he walks back across the house, up the stairs, and puts his hand on the computer screen, and just I can't remember whether he starts praying or what he starts doing, but I was just like, this is creepy too.
Yep.
Everything is creepy.
Well, you're like, what is his motivation? Like, is he just someone who really cares that hard? This stranger who's just so utterly concerned for her safety based on these highly erratic and videos that seem to indicate possibly either murderous and or suicidal intent, or is he just some weird ass guy?
Or both.
Well, it's
both.
Interesting that you say,
ambiguity, folks. This is a movie.
Well, it's interesting that you say that though, because he's not really. Maybe that's what is supposed to make him so creepy, is that he doesn't really present as creepy. He presents to me as confused. You know, like he's not even sure what his motivations are. Which
maybe he's not.
Yeah. And the other thing that's interesting is I don't know where this was shot. It's somewhere in New York because
there's New York plates.
There's that, and there's a thank you to the New York governor's office or whatever in it. So his home, the exterior of his home, looks like it's the Midwest to me. from where I grew
Oh,
up.
interesting.
Yeah. Now, I would be very surprised if it was shot, if they just like went to Ohio or Indiana and took stole 2 shots from somebody's like, but it looks like, this neighborhood that was, so I grew up mostly in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and there's a neighborhood called Devil's Hollow. And it looks a lot like the houses in Devil's Hollow. I never understood why it was called that, because like you can't get much more Christian than Indiana. So to even have the word devil in something is strange.
This looks like bad luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also, I think it's a video game. I think there's a video game called Devil's Hollow.
Oh,
Don't quote
now
me
I
on
wanna
that
play
though.
it.
Oh, that sounds cool. Yeah, I want to play
I know,
that
right?
game.
But the exterior backyard of his home was very familiar to me. Not in a sort of like, oh, that's creepy, but I'm just like, I've been at that house,
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know if I could watch this again just because it is so unsettling, but I kind of do want to watch it again. So I don't know, maybe.
Do it.
Fair enough. Is there anything else we want to talk about this movie?
I could just keep going in circles. So no.
That's the thing I was going to say. I was like, I feel like there's so much to talk about with this film. Like just, yeah, there's so many things. Do you guys, I mean, I know we talk about the ambiguity and we talk about how we don't know what happens, but do you guys have a sense of what did happen? Or are you both just like, nope, don't even know?
I really don't think that he met her in the city and had coffee with her. I don't.
Yeah.
That doesn't strike
That didn't
me
seem
as
real to me
real.
either. I am firmly unsure though about whether she was possessed in some way, shape, or form. That part to me was very unclear and seemed like a very real possibility.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you guys. I don't think that they actually met. It seems like it was something he concocted in his head to kind of give himself closure because he doesn't know what happened to her. But yeah, as far as possession goes or body changes go, who knows?
Yeah. I'm not
Indeed.
sure that I buy that she was possessed. I think that this may have all been cries for help, but I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah.
No, who knows?
Yeah. I think that is why I find this film to be as fascinating and riveting as it is, because there's so many ways to unpack it and there's so many questions. And yeah, I was mesmerized by this film, by its visuals and by its creepy sounds.
Oh yeah, very
Especially
creepy.
the ASMR. I thought this was great.
Unsettling imagery without going into the ick factor of you have to be grossed out by watching. It's not like VHS or those kinds of movies where they just show you gore and grossness and viscera to gross you out. It's just weird, bizarre videos that make you feel. I mean, even my favorite one was when they cut to the 1994 We're All Going to the World's Fair, and it's this like 8-bit video game with like
That was
8-bit
great.
music, and you have to type in We're All Going to the World's Fair in time. That was funny.
I liked that too. Yeah, this kind of reminded me of, even though they're very different, other than they share the screen element of it's taking place on a computer screen for much of it. It reminded me a lot of Host, which I maintain is the scariest movie I've ever seen.
It's really good.
It is. It's so good. And like, I don't get freaked out. I don't get scared like by anything. But that movie was scary because I watched it in the dark on my laptop. It was scary. And the first time I watched this was also on my laptop in the dark. And it was like, yee. But yeah.
I'd see how
anyway.
I can see how that would up the scary factor of this, making it feel, like you're in the character's shoes if you're watching on a computer in the dark.
Yes. Yeah, there really is a voyeuristic element as well as an exhibitionist element, because like you feel like you're in Casey's shoes, but you also feel like you're watching Casey. So there's like, it's definitely that push-pull.
That is actually a really neat trick that they that was to pull that off, that you feel like you're invested in her character, but at the same time you're also seeing it you're in her skin, but you're also seeing it as a voyeur, very, I don't know if I've seen that done before. I mean, if I have, I've forgotten it. It's very bizarre and unsettling. It's a good choice.
And they don't hide the fact that it's camera either. It's not like when you see, the shots of her where it's not her webcam, it's a stationary thing. It's like someone is walking with her in the snow. You see the camera move as someone's like kind of like, walking alongside her and watching her as she goes into the room. Although I think there are multiple instances where I was distracted by the fact that she didn't close the door. She walked into the barn and I thought, I don't think she closed the door. So she's just going to like lay down in there in the middle of winter with the door open.
Yeah,
that's weird.
She did that once when she left the house too. She didn't close the door because the cameraman's got to come in behind her, or the camera person. And, but then it reverses, there's a cut and it reverses angles and the door is closed shut. And it's like, you cheated.
Okay, I'm glad I wasn't the only one that noticed that.
Yeah,
it's a weird thing to linger on, but I'm like, hey, shut the door. It's the only time people leave doors open is in movies or when a realtor's bringing somebody into your house. That's the only time people leave doors open. I don't know why people forget to close doors when they're going to look at a home, but they're just like, I'll just leave a fucking door open, whatever. It's not my house. Not my house. I don't need to shut the door.
Who cares? I can heat the outdoors.
Exactly.
I'm not heating it. I'm not paying.
Do you have animals? No, you don't anymore. Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah.
That took a sad turn.
Yeah, I really got up some realtor's ass because one of his clients left our door open, and one of our cats at the time was like, "Hey, what's out there, man? That looks like it could be pretty cool." But I captured him before he did any kitty damage. So,
that's good.
That's a relief.
Or he was damaged, I should say. So that's how I feel about we're all going to the World's Fair. It starts with me freaking out and ends with me telling a story about my cat. So,
come full circle here, folks.
Yeah.
All right. So let's do a quick recap then. So for me, The Tale of King Crab, which I think is going to be in theaters and VOD, I'm not sure I'd recommend it. It definitely is one half of an interesting movie.
Then I'll go ahead and recommend it. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to be
blindly recommend it. Yeah,
exactly.
Why not? So Tony Hawk, Until the Wheels Fall Off, which is available now on HBO Max. What would you two say?
Oh boy. I mean, I think I'm actually kind of a no, but with a your mileage may vary caveat.
Yeah, I'm a no as well. I think there are interesting parts of this, but cohesive. It's not cohesive for me. So altogether, I'd have to say no. But there are interesting moments of it.
Oh, I'm going against the grain and with a firm recommendation.
I love it. I love it.
Okay. And then we're all going to the World's Fair, which I think is going to be on demand.
And it's going to be in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Yes.
Okay. It sounds like both of you are a yay. I'm
a yay.
To the World's Fair.
I'm a huge yay.
Yep. And this is my time to say your mileage may vary. Not quite my thing, but it definitely held my attention. So, I mean, that should tell you something. It held my attention.
That is something that's important nowadays. There's so many things competing for attention.
It is. And especially knowing that in the end, I don't love movies that are weird or I think are just too weird for my taste, but it still kept me intrigued at the bare minimum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, any movie where a guy pulls tickets out of his arm, can't be that bad.
God, I love that part.
The guy
so
pulls
much.
tickets out of his possibly gangrenous arm. Who knows?
Yeah. I like how he's like, it looks strange, but it feels good. It's like,
right?
Oh, God.
I thought he was going to pull like stuffed animal stuffing out. Not tickets.
Oh, that would have been interesting. I mean,
right?
I can't think of too many instances where I so quickly went from ew to, oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it was very well done that way.
Yeah.
Well, alrighty. That wraps things up for this episode of Spoiler Piece Theater. We want to say a huge thank you to our editor, Otto Clamor. Otto, thank you for making us sound so great week after week.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Otto.
Otto.
You can find the show wherever you get podcasts, but you can also find us at our website, which is spoilerpiece.com. You can find us all over social media. We're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook. We're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and TikTok. And we now have Spoiler Piece merch available, which you can find on TeePublic. If you search us, or you can go to our website, spoilerpiece.com, click on the merch tab. We got t-shirts, pillows, notebooks, all kinds of great stuff. So if you want to support the show and Patreon's not quite your bag, hey, buy a Spoiler Piece shirt. Show it off. Recommend the show.
Yeah.
And if you want to get in touch with us, you can email us, spoilerpiece@gmail.com. You can tell us, I love The Tale of King Crab, and Evan, you're wrong. Or I thought, Tony Hawk Until the Wheels Fall Off sucks. Or, hey, the World's Fair, we're all going to World's Fair is pretty cool. Any of those things. Or you could just say hi and shoot us a message about something totally random. We always appreciate hearing from you.
Yeah.
You can also give us a call
at 862-21-PEACE.
You can leave us a voicemail. You can shoot us a text, whatever. We'd like to hear from you. And if you like the show, please consider rating it and reviewing us on your podcast platform of choice. You can go to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. You can rate us, review us. It helps more people find the show. It just makes us look good and we get those 5-star reviews. We very much appreciate it. And if you really, really like the show, consider joining our Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/spoilerpiece. You can get access to exclusive audio week after week. This week, on our exclusive audio, we talked about The Raid, the 2011 action movie, which is a lot of fun. You'll find that generally on the Patreon, we talk about older films. Every once in a while, we throw some new ones in there, or revisiting movies we've seen but haven't seen for a while, and just generally have a good time. You get access to those week after week, and you also get access to 200 plus bonus episodes by signing up. So I want to say thank you for tuning in to our listeners and our patrons. And I want to say just thanks, man. You guys rock.
Woo.
My name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
My name is Megan Kearns. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I too am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. You can follow me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld or on Instagram and Letterboxd at The Opinion S.
And my name is Dave Riedel. I write about movies. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Dave Sees Movies.
And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.